What are the top 10 best fight scenes in the MCU? There have been so many different moments, and now even more so with the Netflix shows being added to the mix. And so today, it only felt right that we talked about the top 10 fight scenes of the MCU. What is up, everyone, and welcome back to Jones Vibes. Hit the like button if you're an MCU fan like me, or if you're new around here. And I do want to cut to the chase today and dive into this list because there are so many freaking amazing fight scenes throughout the MCU. I honestly realized just how many there are when I sat down and tried to make this list because I was like, oh my gosh, this was a bit tougher than I anticipated. And before I start, I will say this list doesn't include massive group fight scenes, if that makes sense. Because if that was the case, it would just be easy. It would be like the Battle of New York, you got Infinity War, the end of Endgame, Civil War, boom, done, we're good. The list that I worked up is very much comprised of more personal fight scenes. So, my number 10, to get this thing started, I'm going with the Hulk versus Tony in the Avengers Age of Ultron.
I'm sorry.
And this is a fight and movie that I still feel like just flies under the radar. You know, Age of Ultron was a different style movie than the first Avengers, but I don't know how many people out there have gone and rewatched this movie recently. It's amazing. And this massive fight is smack dab in the middle of it. It's great because Wanda's messing with Bruce's mind, and so we see this really brutal version of the Hulk that we don't get too often in the MCU. And then when you mix that with the mechanics of Tony's like Hulkbuster suit, it's just a really good matchup. It also demonstrates the type of destruction that these big battles have on civilization. We hadn't really seen that yet. And in the first Avengers, you have this big, huge battle in New York, but it was like to save the world. And every time you saw civilians, it was just like, oh man, we gotta get them out of the way. We gotta save them. And you felt like our heroes were protecting the people. Whereas in this crazy fight, it's just in the middle of this city and it's just absolute chaos. And it looks like people are truly in danger. And so I just love that realism of this scene and Tony and Hulk just going head to head. It's brutal and it's freaking awesome. It's an awesome fight scene. But moving on to number 9, I put Thanos versus Cap, Tony, and Thor in the Avengers Endgame.
Because you won't be alive to tell them.
And this is one of those fights that I honestly had to think about a little bit when I was narrowing this list down. There was a couple others that I was debating on putting on this list, but you can't knock this fight, dude. Just starting with that opening line from Thanos, you could not live with your own failure, and where did that bring you? Back to me. Not me, I'm talking about Thanos. But the way that this fight truly feels like the balance of everything is hanging in the mix. This is before all the heroes return, so we don't even know that that's happening yet. And you just have these 3 OG Avengers, like our true heroes from the MCU, battling it out with this huge epic villain. And Thanos can fight, man. Like, he really can. He holds his own with everybody, but in the end, it's freaking Captain America demonstrating that he will not quit. The moment where he's worthy of Mjolnir, and he gets that, and obviously, like, I remember our audience's reaction. Everybody just went wild. And you mix that with Captain America's shield getting just completely broken and beaten apart, and he reaches onto his forearm, and he tightens the strap, and he just looks up, and he's like, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to die for this. I'm ready to put it all on the line because it's all I got. It's all I care about. And it's just, honestly, there's so much nuanced emotion within this one fight scene. It's beautiful. And watching it now, we all know what's about to happen. We're going to get on your left and all these heroes are going to come in, but man, this fight is just dope. But on to number 8, and this one is purely due to the whole rework of Daredevil Born Again. Now the Defenders and all of that stuff is being considered canon. And so I'm adding this in because it's one of my favorite freaking fight scenes ever. My number 8 is the Daredevil hallway fight scene from season 1 of Daredevil on Netflix. And when you watch this fight scene, it's about as John Wick or like The Raid as these superhero shows get. And obviously, I think all of us want those style of fight scenes, or that style of fight scenes, I should say, in the MCU. But when it comes to this scene, and this scene specifically, it's shot in a way where you can see that they're trying to make it look like it's just all one shot. I honestly didn't look into it. It could be. There's a lot of little twists and turns where it goes by like a really dark wall, and so you could see where they could probably cut into that. If they somehow did this all in one shot, that is freaking incredible. But aesthetically, like the green glow from the lighting in this hallway is just super creepy and just raw and kind of grungy, and the way that Matt just keeps freaking freaking fighting. There are all these little beats within the fight scene where guys are like, oh man, and like everybody's actually tired. Like it's not just a normal superhero show where they're just like, okay, I'm good to go. Like everybody's just like, oh man, this is tough. And you see how exhausted Matt is in this scene, but he just keeps going and he just keeps kicking ass. And yeah, it's one of those early scenes in Daredevil that just demonstrated how far that they could go with this show. And watching it again, honestly, just makes me really excited for Daredevil Born Again. I hope that they can do stuff like this, because if they do, that'll capture a little bit of magic. So yeah, that's my number 8. Moving on to number 7, I have Hulk versus Thor in Thor Ragnarok. And this is a scene that, I don't know, I just felt like it had to be on the list. It has to. It's Thor versus Hulk, and it's super well done. Obviously, with this fight being in Ragnarok, there's a lot of little humorous moments interspersed within it, so maybe it's not as brutal as some people might have wanted, but it really gives Thor a chance to shine without his hammer. And so these two are very much on a level playing field. You get to see that Thor is a god, and he becomes that god of thunder, and the entire arena just stops and is just like, oh my gosh, like who is this guy? But I love all the hand-to-hand kind of combat stuff. I love when Thor picks up that other hammer and he goes to hit Bruce and Bruce stops it. I feel like Hulk has his moments and Thor has his moments, and it's just a fight that I personally had been waiting to see. I was very eager and excited, and this fight delivered for me. So moving on to my number 6, and this is literally just Cap versus an elevator.
Before we get started, does anyone want to get out?
And obviously, this is from Captain America Winter Soldier. It's one of those iconic Steve Rogers moments that really makes the character what he is. A lot of this is thanks to the Russos. Winter Soldier specifically has a lot of these moments, but this scene in particular is just such a memorable one. All of a sudden, he's in an elevator, and you're just kind of like, what are we doing here? And things feel off. And then it becomes very clear that everybody's just there to kill him. And very much in comparison to the Daredevil hallway scene, just seeing these very enclosed and technically just crazy fight scenes is so much fun, and it comes in a spot in the movie where you just didn't really expect it. But just the way that they piece this thing together, it's just absolutely brutal and beautiful, if that makes sense. But on to my number 5, I put T'Challa versus Killmonger from Black Panther.
The Black Panther, who's supposed to lead you into the future. Come on, bro!
And I'm talking about the first fight that they have, the coronation fight. What Ryan Coogler pulled off with this film is honestly remarkable, and this is a scene in there where you have this amazing villain, Killmonger, challenging the king, challenging T'Challa, and we actually see T'Challa lose. That's something that I love about it, because it adds so much to this story. You see this young prince, new king, T'Challa, get beaten in front of everybody, in front of his family, in front of the other tribes of Wakanda. It just adds so much depth to the character, and I feel like the setting that Coogler chose for this like waterfall landscape, you get the power of the Black Panther sucked out of you, so it's truly a head-to-head, one-on-one fight, and you have just this angry Michael B. Jordan Killmonger character that's just ready to go. And I just feel like in the MCU, it's one of the best examples of a one-on-one, hand-to-hand combat scene. It's not two heroes that have big suits on, or it's not like the Hulk or anything. It's just like two dudes fighting with everything that they have, and I just love that so much, man. But on to number 4, and you know, I could get some flack for this, but I will die on this hill. Number 4 is Shang-Chi versus Razor Fist and all of his goons. For me, having this fight so early on in the movie was perfect, because it was an example of how far this movie was about to go. Like, oh, cool, so we're going to be seeing stuff like this. I also love how Shang, and not Sean, as Katie knows him, like, he demonstrates that he is just a dope martial artist, and Katie didn't know any of this. You got the dude in the corner filming this, like, on live stream, like, what's up, you can follow me here, and all that stuff. And Shang-Chi is just owning these guys, but in a very tough and confident way. He's using using his surroundings to beat these guys. He's using his jacket, he's using this laptop of this girl, and then freaking Razor Fist stands up and acts like he's gonna be some sort of a threat. But once again, Shang-Chi just demonstrates how freaking amazing he is. I love this scene. I love the practicality of it. I love how unique it is. You have the bus going down these streets in San Francisco, going all over the place. Like, this scene has so much added anxiety, but I just feel like what Destin Daniel Cretton brought to these types of moments, it adds a whole new element to the MCU. And man, do I just really want a Shang-Chi 2 at this point. I'm just like dying for it. I really am. But on to the top 3. Number 3 is another scene from Winter Soldier, and this is the Bucky versus Cap highway fight. I honestly think that a lot of people will probably agree with me on this one because it's one of the best examples of action throughout the Marvel Cinematic Universe, throughout all the movies that have come out so far. I think that the elevator scene gets a lot of the highlight, and that's something that a lot of people remember. But when you go back and watch this film, this highway scene all of a sudden just starts. And I love that about the character of Bucky in The Winter Soldier, how throughout this film, he kind of just comes out of nowhere, and all of a sudden, you're just in the thick of it. And up until this point, we hadn't seen Captain America just get brutally beaten like this. Just the close-ups and the fighting style in this, you know, when Bucky pulls out his knife, and he kind of uses that crazy knife-fighting technique, and these two are going at it, like, personally, and they know each other's moves. It's so gritty and down-to-earth, and the Russos just added so much with this movie. They understood how strong the Winter Soldier's arm is in correlation to Cap's shield. And the fight is so tense leading all the way up to this moment where Steve knocks off the mask and he turns around and he realizes that this is Bucky. And yeah, it's one of my favorite scenes of all time. If you guys have seen my rank of the MCU, you'll know how high up on this list this movie is for me. I just absolutely love it. But my number 2 is one of the more recent fights that has come out. This is Peter Parker versus the Green Goblin in Spider-Man No Way Home, and I'm talking about the final fight.
Too weak to send me home to die.
No. I just want to kill you myself.
And thus far with Peter Parker, we had seen Homecoming, we've seen Far From Home, we've seen a lot of heightened stakes for the character, and we've seen him go through a lot. But emotionally, everything he goes through in this movie leads him to this one point where he's ready to kill. Like, he wants revenge. And this is a character in Norman Osborn and Green Goblin that we've seen from Spider-Man 1. Like, we saw Tobey and him have this brutal fight at the end of that, and Tobey wins and comes out. And so you have him watching. It's a very strange vibe because you have him watching, and then you have this Tom Holland Spider-Man fighting that same character, but it's different for this Spider-Man than it is for that one. It means something more to Tom Holland Spider-Man than it did for Tobey. This man killed May, and it doesn't matter if it's this formula that's making him evil or not. Like, I'm not going to stop at anything. And how brutal Tom Holland Spider-Man is in this, absolutely throwing punch after punch after punch and not holding back. Just like Andrew Garfield was talking about earlier in the movie, where I just kind of stopped holding back my punches. The emotion for me, the first time I saw this scene, sitting in the theater, like, I was in shock, and I still get chills even talking about it, because it's just, he loses himself. And for the first time, you see this character that's gone through so much, that we've seen evolve. You see him truly, his eyes kind of going black, and him just going for it, and he picks this glider up, and who stops it but Tobey Maguire? I find this entire scene so well done, and I think that the way that they did Green Goblin in No Way Home was really cool. You have a really kind of older Willem Dafoe, so I wasn't sure how they were going to capture that, but they made him seem even more menacing and tough in this film than when you watch Spider-Man 1, like, than he even seems in that. And so I love that about it, and I love that there's a fight scene in a Spider-Man movie from the MCU that has this much importance to me. It's one of those things. But on to my number 1, guys. We made it. This number 1 is just a scene very much like my number 2 with Spider-Man and Green Goblin, that there's just a lot of emotional weight to it. And when you have high caliber actors like the ones that we do in the MCU, it works. And there are a lot of other movies that try to do things like this and they fail. But in the instance of Tony versus Bucky and Cap in Captain America Civil War, at the end, fighting it out, truly having this civil war.
This isn't gonna change what happened. I don't care.
He killed my mom.
It's one of the most, if not the most powerful scenes in the MCU, because you have Tony Stark, the man who started it all, literally giving everything to stop the man who killed his parents. And even one of his, dare I say, best friends at this point, Captain America, Steve Rogers, all he is just an object in the way. And the way that this entire thing was shot, from the big set pieces of them flying up and, you know, kind of trying to escape, the Winter Soldier trying to escape and Tony not letting them, all the way to them falling all the way down to the bottom and having this epic final fight with like really deep dialogue in the middle of it. Like, you just feel the weight of this entire situation. And when Bucky comes back in, you know, Cap and Iron Man are fighting, and Cap and Bucky just start annihilating Tony, and you have that shot where freaking Bucky is clawing at the heart of Iron Man. Two characters that we love so much, and one of them's trying to kill Tony. Like, it's one of the coolest shots that I've ever seen, and it ends with freaking Bucky getting his arm blown off, and Tony demonstrating just how powerful he is. You have the culmination where Iron Man's rays meet Cap's shield, and there's just this big bright light. It's amazing, and I don't know, sometimes I just feel like we're so lucky to even have scenes like this. And so, yeah, guys, that's my number one. I hope that you enjoyed this list. Personally, I would love to hear your guys' list. Like I said in the beginning of this, there are so many freaking fight scenes throughout the MCU, and so your top 10 might look completely different than this. Obviously, this is just the ones that I enjoy the most. So please, write down in the comments what your favorite fight scenes are. You could do a top 10 list. I don't care if you do a top 50 list. I will read every single one of them, and I would love to see it. Also, if you enjoyed my list, please give this video a like. Just you hitting that like button shows that somebody cares and somebody enjoyed this video, so I very much appreciate that. Reach out to me on X too, guys. I'm at Jones Vibes Only. And don't forget to keep up the good vibes. But that was my list of the top 10 fight scenes in the MCU. And what should I do next?